gonna shove it. Yeah! He's gonna shove it.
Alright, it's the brick talking, back breaking, never shaking HAWK all night, all day, except on Sundays when I make your girl spray. Today on The Hawk Show, it's another episode of Was It Any Good? The show where we try to answer the question for some of the storylines that you may have slept on. And this one is most certainly one I slept on. I didn't even watch the show at this point. You'd have to be a bit crazy to watch ECW in 2009. I certainly didn't have the time. But the guy involved in today's video is a great wrestler and a great promo, so this could be good. It's William Regal in ECW. Was it any good? William Regal at this point in his career was mostly a mid-card wrestler going after the United States title. A few months later he was shipped off to ECW from Raw in the summer of 2009. William Regal would begin his ECW run in a tag team match against Christian, and at the time ECW champion Tommy Dreamer. Regal tries to be a sort of coach-like figure to never-to-be all-star Vladimir Kozlov, and they would actually win the match in Regal's debut. But I can't really give it a positive start because Kozlov hit a blind tag on Regal and stole the victory from his own partner. Already it's a bit confusing and Regal's looking dumb. I can't tell what the dynamic's supposed to be between these two. And if you're keeping score, we got to take more away because we don't get to see Regal again for another 3 weeks after his debut. Vladimir Kozlov tries to carry the feud of Christian all by himself. You can probably tell how that one went. Kozlov picks up 2 victories over Tommy Dreamer in Regal's absence, and also with Regal in no sight. William returns in a match against Yoshi Tatsu, where before the match he gets on the mic and he informs Yoshi that he hates all foreigners. And that's the end of that promo. Regal rightfully loses this match against Tatsu after a roundhouse, and Regal again was just made to look like a jobber, which was always his downfall in every company he was in. Once again, we don't see Regal for another 3 weeks until he has a match with the now former ECW champion Tommy Dreamer, who was defeated by Christian. William Regal actually scores his first victory on ECW on his own after nailing a knee trembler on Dreamer for the win. But immediately after, Regal locks in his patented stretch on Tommy until Christian comes out to make the save. This is starting to look a bit more interesting now that Regal pinned Dreamer and won an opportunity for the ECW title. Flash to the next week of ECW and we have another tag match, but this time it's William Regal and Vladimir Kozlov versus Christian and Ezekiel Jackson. A more than lackluster matchup takes place, but the real story is at the end when Ezekiel Jackson, who is supposed to be teamed with Christian, all of a sudden gives him a Uranagi in the ring and Regal takes advantage and scores the win for his team. It's sad to say, but even the commentators are confused about the heel turn as well. And then the team known as the Ruthless Round Table are born. Kozlov and Jackson then clobber Christian after the match. Guess they're bad winners. William Regal leading a faction. I feel like this should have happened sooner in his career than 2009. We head to our ECW title match at SummerSlam, and as Regal tries to take off his robe, the ref rings the bell like a complete dick, and Christian hits the kill switch on Regal for the win. It took 8 seconds to take down Regal. In retrospect, I feel like this doomed this run. It made Regal look like a joke, and it made his gang of roider men look stupid. William Regal comes out to the ring with the round table on the next episode of ECW. He hypes up these specimens and gloats about the influence he has over them. Can't be too hard. It is Vladimir Kozlov after all. This guy doesn't have 2 brain cells to rub together. Christian comes out to the stage and he of course insults Regal about lasting 8 seconds of their championship match. Regal was clearly not ready, and as Christian insults him, Regal demands another match. Christian responds by calling him Bill. Regal says he doesn't mind if he calls him Bill. ECW GM Tiffany comes out and gives Regal a second chance. William Regal would earn his second chance at redemption after Christian smacks the living hell out of Kozlov, and eventually a knee trembler would put Christian out. Are we about to see a redemption arc from Regal on this run of Was It Any Good? The weeks leading up to this rematch is full of outside interference with Regal trying to help his roundtable members pick up their win. But other than that, and locking a Regal stretch on Dreamer here and there, nothing new happens. We then move on to the Breaking Point 2009 pay-per-view where Christian and Regal would not have an 8-second encounter, but actually a pretty alright matchup for the ECW title. The matchup was pretty stiff, but what do you expect from the Blackpool native? The match would just start to heat up right before it ended. Very disappointing encounter overall. On the next ECW, William Regal tries flirting with Tiffany to earn himself yet another ECW title match opportunity. He thinks it's unfair that Kozlov and Jackson were banned from ringside at Breaking Point, and Tiffany explains why she didn't, which is pretty obvious. I guess everyone's pretty short of brain cells on this show. Tiffany denies his title match request, but he will have a matchup with the Hurricane right now. Seems a bit of a downgrade. Regal goes on to defeat the green superhero whilst also wearing a full suit. That's got to be commendable, right? William Regal would then announce to ECW that Tiffany was involved in a car accident and that he has been made the interim GM of ECW by the board of directors. Regal changes the scheduled ECW title match to a 4-on-1 handicap match. Later in the night, Regal gets a call from the board of directors and his match gets changed to an 8-man tag team match against Christian, Dreamer, Tatsu and Goldust. The round table would take the loss once again and Regal would still look like a chump. We move on to that, to Regal getting interrupted by Zack Ryder, who is angry because he cost his team their match. In comes Captain Charisma, who starts insulting both men, saying that they both don't deserve an ECW title match. Some music plays, and on the stage is a janitor named Angelo. Tony Atlas and Yoshitatsu join him on stage. Angelo looks mortified. This promo is bizarre, as Christian starts naming the things that make these people more worthy contenders for a title shot. Bill Regal then gets a surprise as Tiffany returns to the helm as GM, and Regal gets set with a match against Yoshitatsu once again. Yoshi goes on to defeat Regal for the third time in this run. Next week would be no picnic for Regal either, as he would have to team with Zack Ryder against Christian and Tatsu. Regal would get hit with a hot shot from Zack Ryder. Ryder turning face in the process, and Christian gets a kill switch win on Regal. Other than throwing a couple of shots, Regal was made to look like a complete chump, and it was by Zack Ryder of all people. Regal returned to action a few weeks later for the third time in this run. He interrupts Christian and Tiffany's promo. For some reason, Christian really wants an ECW title match against Regal again, and he wants it tonight. Regal would accept the challenge, but only on his terms. He wants to face Christian in England for home field advantage, and William Regal will be assigned a match against Goldust, which you go on to win. Isn't home field advantage such a weird thing? Statistically, it is proven that you get more wins than your home field, but I don't see why it should make such a difference. We finally get some positivity for William, as the next week in his home country he and Christian would have a clash and a pretty decent title encounter. It's a really fun and competitive title match. The offense was stiff, the counters were well executed, and these two gave their all with what they were given. Regal will go on to team with CM Punk the next week on ECW, facing Christian and R-Truth. They'd win the match. William Regal will be a part of Team Orton at Survivor Series 2009 alongside Punk and Legacy. But unfortunately, Regal will be an afterthought in this match, barely having a role and being eliminated rather early in the match by MVP. It doesn't really help your chances of a good title run coming up. Ironically, Regal was doing the one more match shtick before Christian would do that 2 years later. Regal and Tatsu, who is the real villain of this video, will meet again for the fourth time in ECW. The match was ass, and Kozlov interference somehow helped Tatsu in this case. The round table continued to argue and babble on about the match ending. Kozlov starts pointing the finger at Jackson like he's a small child. Jackson is not happy. Maybe he should shove some more steroids up his ass. Jackson hits a Uranagi on Kozlov and eventually hits one on Regal. So now the round table is starting to fall apart on itself. At least there's some storyline movement, something Regal has lacked this whole run. We move on to the next ECW episode, and Regal walks up to Jackson and apologised to him for lashing out last week. Regal is the hype man and the cornerstone of the group, trying to hold it together. Regal has another unnoteworthy match with Goldust. He runs into a boot, and it looks like Kozlov tries to grab Goldust, but Jackson stops him. Kozlov and Jackson start yelling and shoving each other, and Goldust rolls up Regal for the win. Man, this ruthless round table sucks. Regal and the Round Table would show up for the 2009 Slammy Awards on Raw in a very shitty 6-man tag match against Christian Cage and the Great Khali. Regal is just there to do the JB. In the new year of 2010, William Regal will be present at ringside for an epic match between Kozlov and Jackson, which would ultimately decide Regal's next step in his career. Jackson would defeat Kozlov, and Regal would straddle his face and call him a disgrace. Now at least there isn't Kozlov weighing down the Round Table anymore. We would see Regal in action against Christian in 2 weeks' time, but we're not getting a replay of their European encounter, as Ezekiel Jackson would interrupt the match and end it by DQ. At this point, I think it was Regal's job to get Ezekiel Jackson over, and most of the spotlight was on him at this point on TV, so he was maybe the bump guy for Jackson. Can you imagine that being your job? Jackson and Regal are in the ring now, and they're interrupted by Christian. Christian brings up a Bible quote. How ironic that Christian is talking about Bible verses. Regal is basically out of focus in this feud now, and Jackson begins getting all the mic time. Christian has backup with him in the form of another ECW champion, the Big Red Monster Kane. This is William Regal's last ECW match. It's certainly not a barn burner. The February 2nd, 2010 of ECW is the infamous episode where Vince would announce that ECW would be going off air in the form of the new show NXT. So there wasn't a lot of time for Regal to do anything else, especially after that tag match being his last on ECW. On the February the 16th, 2010 episode of ECW, Ezekiel Jackson would win the ECW title from Christian in an Extreme Rules match. But Regal would actually interfere in this match, only to get a kill switch for his troubles. But that was important because it allowed Jackson to hit the Uranagi on Christian through a table for the win. He'd become the final ever ECW champion. I mean, that alone makes this a terrible run. This whole run ends with Regal crying on the stairs, holding onto Jackson's legs as ECW fades to black. Someone give Regal a smack. I really and truly felt that this could be potentially somewhere where Regal could have some great low-key matches, but he didn't. This whole run was designed just to get the Round Table over, and that was never going to work in the first place. As talented as Regal is, he can't work miracles. So no, William Regal in ECW was terrible. I'd call it vomit-inducing, but I'll leave that to your girl, and if you don't agree with that, I'll make her hurl.